Alright, hello everyone and welcome today to what's going to be the verdict for Donkey Kong Bananza, which is the brand new Switch 2 title. Donkey Kong Bananza is a platformer for the Switch 2. It's effectively a launch title. You play as, I know, surprise, drum roll, Donkey Kong in what is effectively like a Super Mario Odyssey style platformer. The majority of the game is very similar. If you played Odyssey prior to this, I guess this is like the new age Nintendo version of platformers. Instead of it being more similar to like Mario 64 or Sunshine, where you kind of load in and there's a set level that you kind of run through, or even Donkey Kong 64, which is kind of open world but requires a lot of character swapping and backtracking in order to 100% and to accomplish objectives. Donkey Kong Bananza is instead more open world. A lot of the levels might have, somewhat linear objectives of being able to go from A to B. Usually, and depending on how much time and creativity you're willing to put into it, there are multiple ways to accomplish this objective. So Donkey Kong Country, it's not a country game. Donkey Kong Bananza effectively follows Donkey Kong as he dives into the center of the earth. For some reason, he is running a mining company harvesting Bananzium, which is effectively mineral bananas. It's kind of a backstory, a backbone to the plot. Along the way, he encounters Pauline, and using just Donkey Kong's brute force and Pauline's ability to sing and transform things, they set out on an adventure to find the Golden Banandium root, which lies at the center of the planet. And it's cool because there's a lot of references to older games, a lot of references to both Mario and Donkey Kong. There's a lot of really interesting things going on. I'll say the story is just, your typical platformer fare, right? You're not going to find anything too revolutionary, too crazy in here. That's most platformers, to be fair. Usually the story department is pretty lax unless you're playing like a Sony platformer, maybe like Sly or Ratchet. But as far as Nintendo platformers go, it's all right. It's probably got more plot development than most games, right? Like if I think about the platformers I play that have the most development, it's probably like Sunshine, because it introduced a whole like variety of characters that still exist to this day in the Mario universe. Not too knowledgeable about Galaxy 2. Most of the people in Donkey Kong 64 don't really seem to have come back. There are a couple references to previous... Oh, I shouldn't say a couple. There's a lot of references to Donkey Kong games, but, it's not like the overwhelming majority of the plot. This game is meant to be more or less standalone with a couple of nods, so that's fine. That's why usually talking about story in a platformer verdict is kind of a dull and moot point, because it's very rare that we have a platformer that directly has a huge basis in story, but it's there. It's more present than I would say most games, right? So I appreciate it and respect it a lot. It's not the worst thing in the world. The gameplay of this game is really where it shines. So a large chunk of this game is spent manipulating the environment, moving objects around. Donkey Kong has the ability to effectively rip up chunks of the terrain and either use it as a weapon. He could use it to surf over obstacles. He could hit enemies with it. I kind of just said the same thing twice. He could use it to, change and mold and create bridges and environments that he couldn't do before. And there's tons of different kinds of turf that you could rip up, as it's called. There's rocks, dirt, sand. There's even some types of terrain that are based off of food, different things like that. Ice, and each piece that you rip off has different characteristics. So for example, rocks and hard materials are pretty decent as weapons and pretty good with turf surfing because they don't break apart that quickly, if at all. Whereas things like sand and snow and other things could potentially be used as like bridges, right? You could use it to mold the environment. It'll stick to things. Donkey Kong can also punch through the environment, which basically lets you get through around obstacles. You could punch your way around different things. You could go straight to an objective by punching through it if you have the ability. And it's really interesting how the game holds together by allowing you this much freedom, but also having objectives to get through each portion of an area. So sometimes if you want, you could just, run off, grab a whole bunch of stuff, loot a bunch of areas, right? Platform around the environment. And, you could get to objective, never even really talk to the people along the way who are really just there to help you. or you could follow the more linear part of the story, whichever really floats your boat and whatever really works out and helps out for you. So I like that kind of creative freedom in this game because it really allows you to get a good feel for how you want to progress through the game. Are you someone who likes to divert from the chosen path and really try to explore as much as you want? Because right off the bat, even in the tutorial, they're allowing you to really see how much you can destroy. I would imagine a lot of people right off the bat we're happy to just like punch around for a few minutes, try to figure out what's going on, try to get as much Banandium gold as you can, and so on and so forth. And there are reasons to do this. Throughout the levels, there are chests that may randomly spawn, right? So sometimes when you punch into the environment and break things up, there are chests that you can spawn. They will have either maps to other treasures like fossils, which are not randomized. They are set in the area. They could have, you know, potentially like lives or melon juices, which are basically one-ups in this game. They prevent you from dying. If your HP reaches 0, you'll automatically drink one. Sorry, the apple juices will do that. The melon juices allow you to do something else I'll get into later, which is pretty cool. You could also get, you know, balloons for when you fall. The balloons will save you, similar to other Donkey Kong games. And, you know, you have a good reason to farm it. Like I said before, there are fossils that you could find. On every major level, there are 3 different kinds of fossils. There's the small fossils, the medium fossils, and then usually one big fossil that you could find, usually requiring a lot of effort to excavate. You know, you could excavate them by freeing them from the terrain around them, either by punching or throwing objects. And what you can do is you can trade them for upgrades, effectively. Throughout the game, Donkey Kong will have opportunities to get a new tie for himself, new pants for himself, or a new outfit for Pauline. And each of these outfits has some tangible benefit that you could use. So for example, Pauline has an outfit that might increase the amount of gold that you find, or your tie might allow you to accumulate Banandium energy faster, things of that nature. And all of these play a role because it allows you to kind of mix and match what you really like, what you're really good with. You know, the kind of, it's not a ton of RPG style, you know, customization, but it does allow you to say, you know, dive a little bit more into whatever you might want. You know, you want to get more gold, you want to regenerate health over time. These are all things that you could buy in the various shops found in the various worlds of the game. Now, another portion that you can do in the gameplay of this game is that beyond punching, you could punch up, you could punch down, you could punch forward. The controls of this game are pretty simplistic on its face, right? Pretty much Donkey Kong's moves are mostly to manipulate the environment and then manipulate the environment, move things around, right? That sort of a deal. But beyond that, that's the extent, right? There's nothing like crazy. But where the game's really in-depth nature comes in is how you can manipulate that environment, right? And one of the things that you can do is that Donkey Kong can transform in this game. So throughout the game, they give you 5 different transformations. They call them Bananzas, right? So one of them, which basically turns DK into a great ape, allows him to punch much harder. He can do a big wind-up punch. It basically augments all of his natural abilities. There's other ones that you can get. There's one that lets you run over brittle terrain like ice, or you know, just really brittle like dirt and dirt and ground really easily. There's another one that lets you bounce, and you could bounce high up. It also lets you petrify enemies. There's yet another one that lets you fly and glide, and you can sort of manipulate the environment by dropping egg bombs and things like that. So there's a variety of them that you're allowed to use to manipulate and go through the game. And throughout the game, you unlock them, right? They're pretty interesting. There's 5 of them in total. But in order to use them, you have to have Banandium energy, which is normally only accumulated by collecting gold. Now, this was rarely ever a big problem for me, even prior to obtaining one of the most broken transformations. This was rarely a problem. It doesn't take that much gold to fill up your meter. Some of your outfits allow you to extend how long you could stay in a specific Bananza, which is cool. And each Bananza has an upgrade tree as well, that you could get more abilities and stuff. Donkey Kong himself also has upgrades that you could get, more health, longer time in a Bananza, things of that nature. Every 5 bananas that you collect, which are basically your stars, your shines in this game, every banana that you collect will give you effectively an experience point. And once you get 5 of them, you level up. You could buy you get 1 level up point, let's put it like that. And so certain upgrades can cost 1, 2, 3, or 4 points to upgrade. And maybe 1 or 2 of them cost 5, right? So the more bananas you collect, and there's a ton of bananas in this game, okay? There's hundreds. You know, the more bananas that you collect, the more points you get, the more experience points you could then spend to buy an upgrade. So maybe more health, or maybe you want to buy an upgrade that lets DK punch further, or, you know, maybe there's one that affects his Bananza, things of that nature. So in order to help you find these bananas, because some of them are quite literally just hidden in the center of the earth, right? They're literally hidden underground. You have what's called treasure sense, which allows you, you know, it's basically you could clap your hands. It allows you to move objects around that are nearby you, right? Just, you know, get them out the way. That's, I think, maybe an upgrade. It also allows you to sense fossils, chests, even bananas under the ground, right? Wherever they are. And so what I like about this game, and one of the things I think it does really well, is that if a wall is blocking DK, or if the camera is stuck inside of the environment, the wall will basically show like an outline. You know, it's like how in Mario Sunshine, where if the camera ever got into the wall, it would show like a very simplified version of what's going on, so the camera just doesn't get smooshed up against Mario and between Mario and the wall. This is like the evolution of that system. It's a very great system. It basically phases out whatever is behind you so you could actually see what's going on instead of just like rotating it in some weird angle or something, you know? So yeah, I really like that. That's one of my favorite parts of the game, is that when you platform around and you're doing stuff, whether you're deep underground or trying to do parkour above in the sky, treasure sense is helpful. The way the camera handles it is helpful. And that's one of the things I really like about this game. I think it's a really good platformer because of it. Now, beyond that, the environments are very well done. I think there's a good variety of levels, a good variety of things to do. You have your water levels, your lava levels, you know, your forest levels, right? Your typical sort of fare, but I still enjoyed them, you know, between being able to manipulate the environment. You know, you have things that you could go through like wood and metal, and there's a good variety, I'll say. And I do enjoy, you know, the ways that, you know, the different kind of puzzles that they have. For example, some of the challenges are either to reach a certain area in a certain amount of time, or to find, you know, hidden fractones, which are the little people that populate the underground. You need to find a set amount of them in order to progress. Sometimes there's like zone out levels, you know, like if you ever play Spyro, you walk through the portal, there's like a separate area you go to, you do things in, you know, like that. Like there's those kinds of levels which I think are really fun and really cool. And beyond that, I mean, it's just a very enjoyable and entertaining time. I think that there's a lot of stuff that they added to this. They didn't have to, you know, there's a good variety of ways you could finish the levels. There are boss fights. I will say that the boss fights are pretty token. They're not exactly too difficult. Most of it boils down to you need to destroy a part of the boss's body in order to hit an exposed weak point. And while it's cool because in this game, you know, destruction of the environment, destruction of a boss is, you know, a huge part of the game, I'll be fair here, it's not exactly like earth-shattering. This is not going to be a game that tests you too much on the boss fights. Maybe the final boss, but that's it. It's not going to really push you. The challenge really comes from the environment and how you can solve different puzzles. Like if there's a row of ice cubes that you need to have fall and freeze something, or fill in a hole or something, or just trying to dig your way through a minefield underground without accidentally getting blown up. You know, that's where the game really shines, is the way it sets up its puzzles and platforming. The combat is kind of secondary and intentionally kind of simplified. So there's not too much for me to say. The game performs very well. This game does very well on performance. I don't think I really ever had a stutter or anything serious or major, which is good. Switch 2 handles it like a dream, which is magnificent and good to know. Now, what I will say about this game, and I will say this spoiler-free, do not get spoiled on the ending twist of this game, because the ending, like, last level of the game is fucking amazing. It is stupendous. It is so well done. Do not get spoiled on it. Please go play the game for yourself. It is a wonderful addition to the platformer library, and I very much enjoy it. So what would I give Donkey Kong Bananza? Well, my only thing I would say is maybe the game could have lasted a little bit longer. I think that they have about 20 levels, but some of them are like those half, like rest levels. I think if maybe this game at like 25, I think it would have been pretty good. There is a lot to do, and there is a post game, so I'm not going to be too harsh on it, because there are other things that you need to do and you can do with it. But beyond that, I would say that Donkey Kong Bonanza is definitely a sterling example of what you can do with the platformer genre. Even in 2025, you know, after almost 40 years of platformers, we could still find ways and we could still do things. And, you know, Nintendo proves that they still have it. I just wish they would make a few more of these, you know, just what I'm saying, right? You know, it's, you know, a lot of people can make a lot of platformers, you know, that's all I'm saying. But besides that, I would say this is like a solid 9.3, like a 93 out of 100. I forget my scales out of 100, right? It's a very well done game. Could have been a little bit longer. Could have been a little bit more in-depth with the combat. Some of the controls with the Bonanzas is a little weird. Nothing too terrible. And otherwise, I think it's overall a very outstanding, well done game. You know, it definitely pays a lot of tribute to its roots. Right? There's a lot of levels that reference older Donkey Kong games and a lot of new stuff, right? And I get that it's made to be more like an Odyssey style game, and honestly, I think it's better than Odyssey, which is good to know. So that is all for my verdict on Donkey Kong Bonanza. I will see you all in the next one. Have a good one.